Hi, I'm Mr. Simons, and in this video we're going to continue with our walkthrough through the 2017 New South Wales Economics HSC. So let's get into it. In this video we're going to look at section 2 of the paper, the short answers. So there are 4 questions in this section, each worth 10 marks, and they've all got multiple parts. Now, before we start going into some of these questions, what I want to say is that this video is not about creating model responses or me giving you the perfect answers. All we're trying to do is decipher or understand what the questions are trying to ask you and what key bits of content you need to include so that you're going on the right track. So again, these are not perfect, these are not 10 out of 10 responses. This is just a guide on how to answer these short answer questions because there are so many different ways to answer them correctly. Okay, let's start on question 21. Here we are at question 21. 21A is worth 2 marks. And the question reads, why can dumping be used as a justification for trade protection? Okay, so what is this question really asking us? So the question is sort of asking us, why is it okay to use protection to stop the effects of dumping? What is it about dumping that's so bad for an economy that it's okay to use protection? So this is the approach I would recommend taking. So the idea is that because these surplus goods are being dumped on local markets and they're sold below production costs, that this is going to have very negative impacts on an economy and ones that it's worth kind of working to try and reduce the impact of. So the kind of things that we're trying to avoid that arise because of dumping are these sorts of things. So what can happen is that there are negative effects for local firms because there's all this cheaper foreign product out there on the market. Firms' revenues are going to go down, and also we're likely to see a rise in domestic unemployment. And this is because there is less demand for local goods, so less derived demands for workers to produce those goods. So again, if we're looking at why can dumping be used as a justification for trade protection, it's because dumping has such negative effects on an economy, including reducing local firms' revenues and also in terms of increasing domestic unemployment. Okay, let's move on to part B. The question reads, explain the difference between subsidies and local content rules in discouraging dumping. This is very tricky on first read, and I think what the question is really trying to get at is this kind of relationship. So how does subsidies and local content rules discourage dumping? And I think with 4 marks on offer that this neatly divides into talking about, okay, this is how subsidies discourage dumping. And then the other way, this is how local content rules discourage dumping. So I'm just reminding us, you don't necessarily have to include that point, but just remember, okay, so dumping is when foreign goods are sold below cost of production on overseas markets. So now let's look at how subsidies and then local content rules try and discourage this activity. So what do we know with subsidies? Well, if we think about the way subsidies work, we know that with a subsidy, it's going to reduce the price that it costs domestic producers to make goods and services. So it will reduce the cost of locally produced goods and services. And that's essentially that movement down in price will hopefully match or even beat the price of dumped goods on a domestic market. so that subsidies will help to lower production costs, let's be clear, for domestic firms. This will allow domestic firms to better compete with dumped goods. And in fact, this could lead to less of those dumped goods being sold and less of those negative impacts for domestic producers. Okay, let's shift our focus now to local content rules. And let's start by reminding ourselves what local content rules actually refers to. So that local content rules means a certain percentage of production inputs must be purchased locally from domestic suppliers. So then, how would that discourage dumping? So that this creation or introduction of a local content rule would increase demand for domestic goods because local goods have to be used in production. Well, that means that there's less incentive to use foreign goods or buy foreign goods because you have to meet this requirement, this local content rule. So therefore, greater demand for locally produced goods, reduced demand for the dumped goods. So that's going to discourage dumping from other countries because they know now they may not be able to sell all of those goods on that overseas market. Part C, here's another 4-mark question. And what it says here is it's a good old compare and contrast. It says compare and contrast the roles of the IMF and the World Bank in international economic integration. Let's also highlight that because that's very important here. So if we're trying to think about how we would approach it, my brain kind of goes along these lines here. So what we've got is this idea of international economic integration, and we're looking at how does the World Bank do it and how does the IMF do it. And if we're trying to break this down a little bit further, we're trying to increase those ties and connections between economies. So if we think about on a very top line that the IMF is about integrating countries economically and financially. The other thing that's very important role in terms of bringing economies together is it's helping capital or financial flows move around the world. And remember, this K is capital, not the multiplier in this instance. The other thing is that the IMF's role is very big on that the IMF is so big on financial stability, on the countries being strong, on the whole system being strong, which is supporting global growth. So these are some of the roles the IMF plays that help to achieve international economic integration. Let's think about the World Bank. The World Bank is focused on economic development and reducing poverty. And so we can think about, well, why is that going to assist with international economic integration? So that the World Bank is there, it's helping less developed economies grow, attract foreign investment, maybe even and boost their ability to trade, which can then help them increase their links with other wealthy or more wealthy economies as part of international economic integration. And maybe some negatives in terms of international economic integration. We can also provide some criticism. So we could talk about how the IMF makes the people it helps out, those countries, adopt structural adjustment policies and contractionary macroeconomic policies and similar things there, which could be harmful to the country's own development. The other thing you could think about is that with the World Bank, do poorer countries really get a say Are they truly represented in terms of decision making at the highest levels? So what we could say is that all these roles, yes, they're there to support international economic integration, but there are some negatives of the way they are encouraging this international economic integration. Okay, so here we are at the end of question 21. Tune into the next video, which will take us into question 22. Thanks for watching, and subscribe so you can make sure to get all the latest updates about the different walkthroughs that I do in terms of economics exams.